Hi, friends. Thank you again for joining us today at Food for Thought. This is Sunil Chandy, and this is a ministry out of Christ Episcopal Church. And again, we want to thank you for continuing to watch on with us and connect with us as we do the work of ministry. And so if you are here today, please do say hello. Tell us that you're here, and so that we can connect with you, knowing that you're a part of our lives and we're a part of yours. I know that there are at least 5 people on right now on one platform, and there might be some others as well. Oh, hey Jan, how are you doing? Hello, good to see you. Good to see you and know that you're here and connecting. Thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being with us. There'll probably be other people coming on board and saying hello too. Today we have a wonderful guest, a continuing guest, a person who has been here before, and I so much enjoy speaking with him. He's always filled with great wisdom and understanding, and just brings a smile to my face every time I see him or talk to him. But we'll introduce him again to you all in a second. So today, in terms of the food for thought, I was thinking about where we are as a community, not only in Christchurch Westerly, in a community that serves both Westerly and Stonington, Connecticut, and all of the regions around, but also as a community in the United States, where we're in this state where some of us are anxious. We are anxious. I guess most of us are anxious. We're wondering what's going to happen with this election that we have just engaged in through the work of democracy, and we're wondering what the results of those elections will mean to us, for us, and before the show, we still don't have a clear winner of the presidential election. And so there's a great deal of anxiety that people have. And I know that there are even the beginnings of protests in places throughout the country about what votes should be counted and what votes shouldn't be counted. And so there is great frustration and anxiety. And I think in the midst of that, one word that comes out to me, and that is the word that Jesus always says to those disciples that are filled with anxiety about the future, and that is peace. John 14 verse 27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not let them be afraid." Peace. And then, of course, Jesus, at the end of the Gospel of John, once he is crucified and those disciples are locked behind locked doors, Jesus comes in the midst of them. He has died and then resurrected, and then somehow he comes and is in the midst of them, in the midst of their fear, as they're hiding behind closed doors, and he breathes on them, and then says simply, "Peace, and know my peace be with you." He tells his disciples, and I think that's a really wonderful word to reflect on. I think today, especially, and as we move into the coming months, peace. Having God's peace settle in on us, quieting our hearts and minds so that we might begin the process of healing and renewal. I think, whenever we are frightened, whenever we have anxiety, which is linked to our fear, we feel so unsettled and we react in many different ways. I think what God calls us to do in the midst of those times, in the midst of this time, I think, in particular in our history, is to breathe in God's breath and know that God is present in the moment, and God can convert all situations to be good for all of us, not just for some of us, but for all of us. And so as we let that peace dwell in our hearts, we also act in a way that brings peace to the world around us. One of the things that my uncle, when I was growing up, I had an uncle who always said, "There's always 10 ways to say something to somebody." There's always many different ways that you could communicate an idea. You could communicate it roughly. You could communicate it with a sense of anger. You could communicate it also with a sense of love and hope and joy. And so even having God's peace enter into our hearts and settling our hearts, maybe we could also turn around and then settle the hearts of other people around us, allaying fears and helping people to find connection with us and with this deeper peace that we ourselves feel. And when we do that, then we become people that help the kingdom of God to be a reality. And for our nation, this is exactly what I think we need in order to allow us to heal after the elections. Now, we have our guest today, and Bishop Prince Singh, who is a wonderful friend of our parish and also a wonderful friend of mine. I've known Bishop Prince Singh for over 20 years, and whenever I speak to him, I feel a sense of peace and of calm and insight. And today Bishop Singh is the diocesan bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Rochester, and he is in the midst of many different chaotic situations, but he always mediates a sense of peace coming from his faith. And so, Ben, would you bring Bishop Singh on board? Hi, Bishop, how are you doing?
Good, Sunil. Good to be with you. Good to hear you.
Oh, it's always good to see you. I love his love. I get a smile on my face when I see you. You know that, right?
It's mutual, man. It's mutual.
Yeah. So we live in chaotic times. It's an anxious time right now, and I know that when we spoke privately about a week or two ago, and it was chaotic time. It was a chaotic time 2 weeks ago, right? And there was one thing that struck me in our conversation at that time was that you were saying that it's time for healing to occur and healing to happen. And there's so much divisions. I mean, it's interesting how the election results yesterday, I mean, it wasn't overwhelmingly supportive of one candidate or another. The election shows that we are a deeply divided nation. And so we might want to we might think that our perspective is the right perspective, but there are about 50% of other people who actually feel the opposite. And so how do we bridge the divide? How do we bring healing?
Well, thank you again for having me. One place that I've been reflecting quite a bit, and especially the last couple of days, is the place where for democracy to work, you need people who actually believe in it and show up to do the work, right? So here we are standing at a pretty historic moment. This is probably the biggest voter turnout election, certainly in our lifetime, but probably, probably a historic one in that sense of the word. More than 150 million people have voted. And the fact that this is the first election in our nation's history which has happened during a pandemic. The
Yeah.
1918 pandemic was just a few years after the election. I think 16 was the election. And so it wasn't a pandemic election. This is. And
Yeah.
to just pause and say that this country and its citizens cared so much for this country's soul that
Yes.
they came out and voted despite a pandemic
Yeah.
is, I think, a pretty phenomenal witness
Yeah.
to the resiliency of the American people. And I think we should pay some attention to that. Because at the end of the day, once we recognize that there is a real drive for us to be one country, and that's why we show up. I mean, that's what democracy is. Well, we can have all kinds of differences of opinion in terms of what we believe is important, what our worldview is, what our vision for the future is. All of that can be, differentiated, which is really the story. I mean, like you aptly said, we are so divided as a nation in terms of those kind of visions for the future and what we want for our children and ourselves, etc., values we hold. But we also care deeply for this country.
Yeah.
And where's the evidence? It's in the fact that we showed up to vote. So I am becoming a lot more of a believer in the fact that this is a democratic republic and a country, not because it's a title that we sort of hold up there without any meaning. It actually is, and here's the evidence. you know
Yes.
and through this pandemic, the other piece of evidence that I picked up is that despite all the differences that we have, most people, for instance, wore masks.
Yeah.
And that is, it's a huge inconvenience for the most part, right? But we did it not just for ourselves, we did it for our neighbor,
Yes.
for the people around us. So there's, I want to always go back to a place of saying, where is the evidence of hope? Where are the signs of hope? I think we have a lot of signs. And these are certainly signs that are very relevant to us for right now. Then that gives me hope to say, you know, we can actually listen to one another because we care. We care deeply for each other. What we probably need to understand is that while we differ in our opinions, we are still the same family at the end of the day. We've been that. I think the dream of America is that we will actually practice that in some real ways. We're having some difficulties practicing it, but the reality again is, while we are a democratic country and we actually care for this country, and so we can get over some of these differences by listening more, by probably being a little more of curious people
Yeah.
instead of just people who are digging our heels in. Uh, and I think we need to laugh some. I think we need to just take ourselves less seriously in some remarkable ways, because what is common about holding us together is more important than what divides us in terms of differences of opinions, worldviews, visions, etc. Now, that's not easy to do, but I think what I am taking some courage out of is, and hope out of, is this notion of, my goodness, we actually care so much that we are not indifferent.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Bishop. I think that's beautiful. I was talking to someone this morning actually, and he brought up this book that I'd never read. He's a scientific author. His name was Thomas Kuhn, and he was the one in the 1967, I think, in 1960s, 70s. He brought up the idea of paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
He was the one who coined that term. And I'm going to pick up the book, but one of the things that we were talking about is that we have these. One of the things that he was talking about in terms of science was that there was a body of evidence that produced one model of looking at the world, and then there's a competing model that develops because sometimes the answers that we had with our first model was never really fully answered, and so another model is developing, and so it's always kind of like this idea of moving between the two models.
Right.
And he said that the transition time between moving from one model to the second model is what causes the frustration, because there are people, the model that the original model answered a lot of questions for people. And so people hold on to it. And I was thinking about that, and I said, and God moves us from, I think God helps us to evolve, to understand who we are and the world around us and our relationship to it. It helps us to evolve. And so I think we were talking, and I said that the place that maybe God is the place in which we are transitioning. This idea, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art with me. As we move from one place to the other, as people move from one understanding to the other, God walks right in the midst of that with us. And I was thinking, so that's why our local church communities are so important.
Right.
Because we have people that hold on to. I have in my congregation, I have people who are deeply conservative and then also deeply liberal, and everyone in between. And the space that we're connecting to each other is so very important. Our work is so important because we learn to work with each other.
Right.
We learn to listen to each other, and we learn to grow from each other, because he was saying something to the effect that the person I was talking to said that the models, not everything is going to be either black or white. Sometimes the models are in between. It's complex.
Right. Yeah, so much of spiritual worldview is about, I think, what you're describing. Anthropologists use the word liminal, which is the in-between space between, standing on the boundary, so to speak, between here and there, between dawn and night. There is that liminal space, and it's probably the most pregnant of spaces, where it's a thin space where there is a confluence of both realities, and philosophers use the sense of both and thinking, not just either or, which is pretty important. I think some of Western philosophy has some problems or problematic pieces within it, because it's all about point, counterpoint, thesis, antithesis. And when we look at Jesus, for instance, and realize what peace was, the way he taught it and lived it, it was really about standing in liminal spaces without having resolution. Most of the appearances where he would utter those words, peace be with you, or an angelic person or figure would come and utter those words, there was a lot of fear and anxiety. There was very little resolution. When the disciples were scared, and Jesus, the risen Christ, showed up and said, peace be with you, they didn't have resolution. What they did have is his presence.
That's right. So yeah, he didn't take away the Roman soldiers that were looking for them, or nothing at all. But what they had, right? Yeah.
Which, in a way, that's central to our own sense of, what is peace? Peace is not the resolution of conflict. In fact, I would also say, peace may be the most difficult thing to embrace, because it's not just a feeling. It's more than a feeling. Martin Luther King called us to pursue not a passive peace, but an active peace, where the differences are necessary. It's important in this American experiment. One of the things I really love about America is the fact that we can actually have very strong opinions and really go to task with each other and say, how can we make us better?
Yes.
With deep passion. And yet, I think the peace part of it, the liminal part of it, is then to say, but I am dealing with my brother, my sister.
Yeah.
You are not my enemy because you believe differently. You cannot be my enemy because you believe differently. Because without you, I'm going to be less than I can be. Without you and me, we are all going to be less than we can be, capacity-wise. So I think you're naming something really important in terms of the paradigm piece, in that we do need to be in those liminal spaces, which are difficult spaces. They're not, because you're not going to fix it.
Yeah.
But if we can hang around and in those spaces with one another, we will be a little more gentle, a little more kind, a little more curious. And then we will recognize, the us and the them is melting away, and we are all figuring out that we are us.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Prince. I really love that. This last Sunday was our All Saints Celebration Sunday, and we,
Right.
and I'll tell you, I remembered all the saints in this particular parish, because there was this one particular saint who just passed away, and her death was very sudden, and she suffered from cerebral palsy. And so she had a hard time walking all through her life. And when I met her, it was she's probably about 8 to 5 years older than I was, and so she's been having this for over 50 years. And I remember one of the great things about her is that she had this really wonderful strength to help people. She knew who people were, and she loved them. She knew she kind of could read people well. She was just brilliant this way, and she was a strategic thinker. Always, one of the things that she would do is, like, Sunil, as we ended a meeting, she'd say, Sunil, could you take this piece of paper, put it next to that table right there, next to that entrance of the church? And I'd say, why, Meg? Why would I do that? And he goes, well, tomorrow I have the meeting, and I'm going to come through that way, and I'm going to pick up that piece of paper and pencil, and then I'll take it to the meeting. Because she had crutches. She was walking with crutches.
Wow.
And so she had this really gift of being strategic. She knew about people and their gifts and all that. So she knew how to love people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing about it was that she also knew how to receive love. She knew how to receive help. And the beautiful thing about it that relates to what we're saying right now, I think, Bishop, is that, in the community of saints, in the community of God, we need each other.
Yeah, we do.
To give and receive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether we're conservative or liberal, we need each other. Exactly what you were saying. Yeah, it resonates with me, definitely. Anything you say resonates with me, Bishop.
I'm learning. Well, I was just actually reminded of one other thought, which is, you remember the word Ubuntu from South Africa? It's a concept of just recognizing the fact that we do need each other, and that we are less than what we can be without the other, right? And Ubuntu's simple meaning is, I am because you are. Because without you, I'm really nothing. Yeah. Which is what Jesus was teaching too, without God, we are nothing. And without us, God is nothing. It's a bizarre reality, but that's the depth of commitment that we as people of faith are invited to. That's what makes this holy, and every person, regardless of how messed up they feel their life is important, because without that, something is lost in the world. You know, I mean, I talk to some people who are um, really depressed during this time of COVID, and people who are feeling very alone and so on. And it is so important for them to recognize that they, by just being present, are making a difference in the life of other people whom they don't even know. And that's why we call it the body of Christ. Every part of the body matters. Every part matters. Like we keep saying in this democracy, every vote matters. Why? Because without that, we are less than we can be.
Love that. God bless you, Prince. I really thank you for that thought. Yeah, so we're about time, and I know that you have a busy schedule, Bishop. You've given us words of wisdom throughout this time, but any parting words of wisdom?
Well, I would just say, hold no malice is probably the biggest gift that we have received from Jesus. He embodied that sense of, no matter what people had against him or his opinions, he did not hold anything against anybody. So I would say that in the days and months and years to come, I hope we can learn that we all have the capacity to hold no malice against anyone. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you again. God bless you.
Thanks, Sunil. Be well. Love to your family, Simeon.
All right.
And the both.
Same here. Same here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bishop Prince Singh from the Diocese of Rochester. Just an amazing man filled with wisdom, reminding us in this time of anxiety and struggle to hold no malice, to find peace, to recognize that we need each other. Let's end our time with prayer. The prayer that was written by Bishop Thomas Brown of Maine. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Jesus Christ, you traveled through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made well. Come to our aid now in the midst of the global spread of the coronavirus. Heal those who are sick with the virus. May they regain their strength and health through quality medical care. Heal us from our fear, which prevents nations from working together and neighbors from helping one another. Be present with those in authority who are making hard decisions. Support the medical professionals, emergency responders, counselors, and caregivers, priests and pastors. We ask this all in your name, Jesus. Amen. Join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Friends, go in peace to spread the light of Christ, the light of hope, the light of peace and reconciliation. The world needs it right now.
Hey, Facebook friends, my name's Caswell Cook, and I am the junior warden here at Christ Church Westerly, and I'm here to issue a challenge to all the folks that love to watch our programming here on social media. Food for Thought with Father Sunil, 5 days a week, our services that are streamed on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. All of those things have a cost. And right now we're trying to make our budget for 2021. And it's a little difficult because each year when people pledge for the year coming up, we're able to make a budget. And if we look at the trends of the last few years, we will see that some years it's up, some years it's down, but we are on a downward trend. And this year we are going to reverse that downward trend because I'm going to encourage you to fill out a pledge form. Pledge form is very easy. In fact, it's right below in the comment section. You can just click it and then email it to Christ Church. Or you can click and make a one-time donation too, which is also a link below. Our challenge to you is 40 pledges, new pledges, or reoccurring pledges that haven't filed yet by the end of this year. That leaves us with 2 weeks. But we can do it, Christ Church friends and family. We can do it because we want to keep this place viable and we want to keep this place successful. And once the pandemic is over, we don't want to stop streaming. We want to keep it going, but it costs a lot of money. In fact, it costs $30,000 this year to stream all of these services. But we transition seamlessly from in-person to online services. And now we kind of have a hybrid situation going on. Pledging is a weird word. It's something that people don't do much anymore. And so I kind of wanted to put it into layman's terms. We just kind of need to know that you'll help us in 2021. And by writing it down in advance, it really does help us. By knowing what's coming in the following year, it enables us to set a budget. So you could just simply say, listen, I can give $50 next year. Or I could give $5,000 next year. The amount doesn't really matter. We want to get more folks involved. And if you're watching this in Texas or England or anywhere around the world and Christ Church has become your new home online, we need your help too. You're a parishioner. It counts. But we need your help. But we need folks to step forward and to say, this is what I will do in 2021, no matter what the amount is. It can be a one-time amount. You could send in a check or make an online donation and just put pledge 2021. Or you can say, look, I'll give X amount a week, X amount a month, or a quarter, or just once a year. But knowing what's coming is what is going to help us. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you will take the 40 by December 31st challenge and be one of those folks that will pledge their time, talent, and treasure to 2021. So here's that challenge. Thank you for your support.